No one tells you the exact moment your identity becomes an offense. It just happens. 1 second you're sitting at the dinner table, passing the mashed potatoes like everything is fine. The next, your father is looking at you like you're filth. That's the night I lost my name. My name is Aaron Miller. I was 17 when it happened. It was a Friday, late spring. I still remember the smell of my mom's pot roast mixing with the freshly cut grass from our backyard. The house felt warm in that subtle way where you feel like nothing could ever go wrong. Then Dad found my journal. I used to keep it buried under a stack of old textbooks in my closet, but I was sloppy that day. Rushing out the door for school, I tossed it on my bed. When I came home, it was gone. I searched everywhere, every drawer, every backpack zipper, even the laundry basket. Nothing. I knew then. I knew before dinner even started. He didn't say a word while we ate, not one. Neither did Mom. That silence was heavier than any yell he'd ever thrown my way. It wasn't until dessert that he dropped the bomb. No yelling, no drama, just his voice, low and cold. Is it true? I looked up, confused. Are you a queer? The fork in my hand slipped and clinked against the plate. The air was so still, even the old ceiling fan seemed to pause. My heart thudded in my chest. What? I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. He didn't repeat it. He just pulled something from his lap, my journal. The pages were bent, the spine cracked. He held it like it was infected. You wrote about a boy. Luke said you kissed him. What? My blood turned to ice. Luke was my secret, our secret. Then Mom spoke, not to defend me, not to ask what happened, not even to say she still loved me. Did we do something wrong? She whispered, almost to herself. That hurt worse than Dad's words. He stood up from the table, the chair screeching backward. You'll pack your things tonight. What? You're not staying under this roof, not while you're like this. Mom didn't say a word. Her silence was permission. Her silence screamed. I tried to fight it. I tried to explain that I was still me, that I didn't change, that being gay didn't erase every memory they'd ever made with me, but they'd stopped listening the moment they read those pages. I didn't cry right away. I packed, mechanically, t-shirts, socks, a few hoodies. I took the photo of me and my little sister Ellie from the dresser and slid it between the pages of a book. I didn't know where I was going, but I knew I couldn't stay. It was almost midnight when I finally sat in my beat-up Toyota Corolla in the driveway. The keys were in the ignition. My heart was pounding. I looked back at the porch light still on. No one came out, no last-minute apologies, no hugs, just the sound of my dad locking the front door from inside. That sound, that click, was the final goodbye. I drove around for hours that night. Gas was low, my phone battery lower. I ended up at a gas station on the edge of town, parked in the corner, tried to sleep. But sleep doesn't come easy when your entire life has been ripped out from under you. That night I stared at the ceiling of my car, the dome light casting soft shadows across the upholstery, and realized something. I was no longer Aaron Miller, son of Daniel and Margaret Miller. I was just Aaron. And for the first time, that didn't feel like enough. I wanted to scream, to punch the dashboard, to drive into a lake and not look back, but all I did was whisper to myself, this can't be the end. What? It was the beginning of a long, painful journey, but I didn't know that yet. All I knew was that my father, the man who used to lift me onto his shoulders and call me his little champ, had just called me a disgrace. And my mother, who used to tuck me in at night and kiss my forehead, couldn't even look me in the eye. I was 17, alone, and gay in a world that had just told me I didn't belong in my own home. But even in the quiet, cold dark of that night, part of me whispered something else, something dangerous. One day they'll need me. And maybe, just maybe, I wouldn't be there. If you ask me when I knew, I wouldn't point to some grand revelation or dramatic moment. It was more like gravity, subtle, undeniable, always there, and the center of it all was a boy named Luke. Luke Harrison lived 3 blocks away and had that kind of smile that could light up the darkest parts of your head. We met in middle school, first in gym class. He passed me the dodgeball when I was too scared to throw. After that, we became inseparable. We were both the quiet kind, tucked in our own corners of the world until we found each other. By freshman year of high school, we were more than just friends, though we didn't dare say the words. We spoke in glances, shared headphones in the back of the bus, lingered longer in each other's rooms after homework was done. In a town like ours, tight, conservative, always watching, you didn't come out. You didn't even think about coming out. Luke was my first everything, my first crush, my first heartbreak, my first taste of freedom and fear mixed into one. I remember the first time we kissed. It wasn't planned. It wasn't even supposed to happen. We were in his room, lying on the floor, listening to a scratched CD of old rock songs. I think it was The Killers. We were laughing about something. I don't even remember what when he went quiet, looked at me, really looked. And then he leaned in. It was soft, hesitant, but real. When he pulled away, he whispered, "Is that okay?" I remember nodding, not trusting my voice. He smiled again, that quiet, crooked smile, and laid back down beside me like nothing had changed. But everything had. We never talked about it much after. It became our secret world, our escape. When things got too loud at home, I'd bike to Luke's house. When school felt like a war zone, he'd slide me notes with stick figures and stupid jokes that made everything bearable. But secrets don't stay hidden forever. It started unraveling junior year. Luke's dad caught us holding hands under the bleachers after a football game. We thought no one was there. We were wrong. The fallout was instant. Luke's phone went dark. He stopped showing up to our hangouts, stopped answering my texts, stopped being Luke. I thought maybe he was just scared. Maybe he needed time. Until I saw him in the hallway the next week, walking past me like I was a stranger, like we never existed. It broke something inside me. Still, I didn't hate him. How could I? He was trying to survive in a place that ate boys like us alive. And deep down I believed, no, hoped that he still remembered, that the Luke I knew was still somewhere in there, just buried under fear and guilt and pressure. Then came prom. I didn't plan on going, but Ellie, my little sister, begged me to chaperone her and her friends. Just this once, she said. You can leave right after we take pictures. So I went, rented a cheap tux, put on a fake smile. That's when I saw him, Luke, in a tux that fit too well, laughing with a girl whose name I didn't know, looking like he belonged in every glossy picture the school would post on Monday. And for a second I wanted to be mad. I wanted to storm over and remind him of all the things we promised in whispers, but I didn't. I just walked outside and sat on the curb, and he followed. Hey, he said, just like old times. I couldn't look at him. You don't get to hey me anymore. He sat down next to me, close but not touching. I'm sorry. For what? I asked. For disappearing, for pretending I don't exist. For letting your dad scare you into forgetting everything we had. Yes, he whispered, all of it. We sat in silence for a long time. He reached for my hand and I let him, even though I knew better, even though it hurt. I still think about you, he said, every day. And just like that, all the pain, all the anger melted into something else, something sadder. I wasn't mad anymore. I was just tired. Then why didn't you fight for me? I asked. He didn't answer. That night I knew something had to change. I couldn't keep holding on to ghosts. Couldn't keep clinging to someone who only loved me in the shadows. It wasn't fair to me or to whatever future version of me might exist out there. Still, even after I left prom, even after I drove away from that school and everything it stood for, I found myself writing about Luke in my journal, every word dripping with memory and longing and pain. And that was the journal my father would find, the one he would use to decide I wasn't worthy of his name anymore. Luke wasn't the reason I got kicked out, not really, but he was the spark. The quiet fire that lit the fuse under everything I thought I could hide. Sometimes I wonder if he ever thinks about that, if he knows what his silence cost me. Maybe one day I'll ask him, but not today. You'd think when your life falls apart, there'd be some kind of warning. A red light, a siren, a countdown ticking in the back of your head. But the truth is, destruction often comes in silence. In my case, it came in the form of my mom's roast chicken, a chipped dinner plate, and my father's cold, unreadable stare. It was Sunday. We always had Sunday dinners. A family tradition: roast, mashed potatoes, green beans, and awkward small talk that didn't mean much, especially not since Luke. I'd felt something off all day. My dad was quieter than usual. My mom had avoided eye contact every time I came into the room. Even Ellie had kept her head buried in her phone, pretending not to notice the tension hanging thick in the air. I should have known. My journal sat in the center of the table, next to the salt shaker. It wasn't there when I sat down. It appeared somewhere between my dad's second helping of potatoes and my mom asking how school was going. He didn't even touch it at first, just let it sit there like a loaded gun. Then mid-chew he said, "Aaron, do you have something to tell us?" I froze, my fork stopped halfway to my mouth, my heart sank. I knew this was it. I don't think so, I said cautiously. He reached forward, flipped open the journal, and began reading. Aloud, his voice was flat, monotone, like he was reading a weather report, but my words, burned as they filled the room. I think about him when I go to sleep. Luke smells like mint and clean laundry. I wonder if he dreams about me too. He closed the journal and pushed it toward me. Explain this. I couldn't speak, my throat locked. My hands shook. My mother looked like she might be sick. Is this a phase? She asked. You're not acting on these thoughts, are you? I looked at her, really looked. This woman who once kissed scraped knees and whispered bedtime prayers. And now she stared at me like I was diseased. I'm gay, I said quietly, and just like that, everything shattered. The silence after those two words was louder than any scream. Dad pushed his chair back so hard it scraped the floor. He stood over me, face red, fists clenched. Not under my roof, he spat. You want to live like that? Fine, but not here. Daniel, my mom started, but her voice was weak, hollow. No, he barked. I will not let some perversion live in my house and corrupt this family. I looked at Ellie. She was crying quietly, shoulders shaking. She didn't say a word. Get out, Dad said. I stood numb. I don't have anywhere to go. What? He walked to the coat closet, grabbed a duffel bag, and threw it at me. Then figure it out. Maybe when the world rejects you too, you'll learn. I gathered what I could in minutes, a few changes of clothes, my toothbrush. My journal now defiled, its pages smudged with his fingerprints. As I stood in the doorway, I turned back one last time, hoping, begging for someone to stop me, to say, wait, come back, we can talk. But they didn't. Dad just said, you made your choice. Mom didn't even look up, and Ellie, with tears streaking down her cheeks, mouthed, I'm sorry. I stepped out into the night, the door shutting behind me like a cell door, and that was it. My childhood, my family, my home, all gone in the span of a dinner. For a while I just stood there on the porch. The night was cool. Crickets chirped like nothing had happened. Neighbors watered lawns. Somewhere down the street, someone was laughing. The world kept turning, but mine had stopped. I got in my car and just sat there. I didn't drive. I didn't cry. I just stared at the steering wheel, waiting for something, anything to make sense. Eventually I drove. Nowhere in particular. I found a grocery store parking lot, parked under a flickering light, and tried to sleep. But sleep doesn't come easy when you're carrying the weight of rejection. I replayed the dinner over and over again in my mind, like some cruel movie I couldn't turn off. Every line, every stare, every second of silence. That night I learned something. Coming out is not always a celebration. Sometimes it's a crucifixion, and your cross is made of everything you once loved. I wasn't angry, yet I was just numb, hollowed out, like someone had taken a sledgehammer to my insides and left the shell standing. But something inside me, buried deep, whispered, survive this. Because one day they'd see. And when they did, they'd have to live with what they threw away. There's a particular kind of silence you only hear when you're sleeping in a car. It's not peaceful, it's not calming, it's empty. It hums through the upholstery and creeps under your skin. That first night, as I lay curled in the backseat of my Corolla, my knees pressed to my chest, I listened to that silence until it sounded like my own heartbeat. I parked behind the old Winn-Dixie on 12th Street. It was quiet there, mostly abandoned since the store shut down. The overhead lights flickered just enough to keep me from feeling completely invisible, but I was. No one saw me, no one cared, the windows fogged up by 3 a.m. My hoodie did little to fight the cold. I used an old gym bag for a pillow and my jacket as a blanket. Sleep came in spurts, 15 minutes here, a dreamless hour there, always interrupted by a jolt of fear. Every noise felt like danger, every shadow looked like a threat. I kept a screwdriver under the seat, just in case. By morning, my body ached, not from injury, just from existence. My back hurt from the car's stiff cushions, and my soul hurt from everything else. I drove around aimlessly. Gas prices stared back at me like reminders of how short my runway was. $3, $52 a gallon. I had $46 in my checking account. I couldn't afford to go far. I pulled into a public library and sat in the parking lot for an hour before it opened. When it did, I went straight to the back and charged my phone. I used the Wi-Fi to check job listings, not that anyone was hiring a 17-year-old high school dropout with no address and no references. I skipped lunch that day, not by choice. I rationed a granola bar I found at the bottom of my backpack, split it in half, one for now, one for later. By the third night, I'd learned how to crack the window just enough to keep air flowing without letting in the mosquitoes. I kept a roll of toilet paper in the glove compartment and used gas station bathrooms when I could. It wasn't living, it was surviving. I avoided school. I couldn't face the whispers or the stares. I imagined Luke walking through the halls, laughing like nothing happened. I hated him for that, and then I hated myself for hating him. I started making up rules, tiny rituals, to keep myself sane. No crying before sunset. Brush teeth even if it's just with water. Keep the car clean. Chaos outside, order inside. Don't look at their Facebook pages. I broke all of them by the end of the week, but somewhere in that mess I found something strange: freedom. Not the romantic kind, the lonely, terrifying, real kind. The kind where no one tells you when to eat, when to sleep, or how to feel. For the first time in my life, I had nothing to lose, and maybe that's why I didn't break. Not completely. On the 5th day, I met a guy named Kenny. He worked the night shift at a 24-hour diner I'd been sneaking into for free coffee refills. I guess he noticed I hadn't ordered any food the last 3 visits. That night, as I sat in a corner booth pretending to read an abandoned newspaper, he walked over and dropped a plate of pancakes in front of me. On the house, he said, "You look like hell." I laughed. "Thanks. What? You got somewhere to sleep tonight?" I hesitated. He raised a brow. Figured, you don't gotta tell me the story, just be careful where you park. Cops love writing tickets for vagrancy. That word hit hard, vagrancy. Like I was a problem instead of a person, but Kenny didn't say it like that. He said it like someone who understood. We talked a little more, not much, but enough for me to realize he wasn't just being nice out of pity. He'd been there once too, got kicked out at 16 for wearing too much eyeliner. His words, he told me about a shelter across town, said it wasn't fancy, but they had warm beds and locked doors. Sometimes locked doors are worth more than gold, he said. I nodded, but I didn't go that night. I wasn't ready to sleep around strangers, not yet, but knowing there was a place that maybe someone still gave a damn meant more than pancakes. It meant I wasn't invisible. I stayed in my car for another week after that. I learned to shower at the community pool, learned which church parking lots let you sleep without calling the cops. Learned how to fake a smile when people asked, "How's your family?" But the hardest part wasn't the cold, or the hunger, or the fear. It was knowing they did this to me on purpose. My father, who once stayed up all night building me a science fair volcano. My mother, who used to say I was her miracle baby. They chose pride over their child. They looked at me and decided that who I loved made me unlovable, and that's the kind of pain you don't just wake up from. That's the kind of pain that builds a fire inside you, one that doesn't go out, one that waits. Because deep down I knew something they didn't. One day they'd need me, and I'd still be me. They say blood is thicker than water, but I learned quickly that sometimes water holds you up when blood tries to drown you. I didn't find my new family in a house with a white picket fence. I found them in a rundown community center with a leaking ceiling and a vending machine that never worked, the kind of place most people drive past without noticing. But for people like me, the forgotten, the broken, the tossed aside, it was a lighthouse. It started with Kenny. After 2 weeks of sleeping in my car, eating whatever I could afford or steal, and slowly unraveling at the seams, I finally listened to his advice. I drove across town, past a boarded-up laundromat and a row of trailer homes until I saw the faded sign, Haven Outreach Center. I parked and sat there for a long time. My fingers trembled on the steering wheel. Part of me felt like I was giving up, like stepping inside that building was admitting I was nothing but a lost cause. But I wasn't ready to die, and I was getting dangerously close to that cliff. Inside, it smelled like old socks and burnt coffee. A woman with bright red glasses and an even brighter smile greeted me from behind a folding table stacked with forms. "First time?" she asked. I nodded. She handed me a clipboard and said, "No pressure. You don't even have to fill it out today. Just come in, sit, breathe." Her name was Maggie. She wore rainbow pins on her cardigan and called everyone sweetheart. She never asked why I was there. She just told me where the bathroom was, pointed to the pile of donated clothes, and said, "There's leftover chili in the back. It's not poison, I promise." I ended up staying for 4 hours that first day. I didn't talk to anyone, just sat in the corner and listened. There were others like me, kids with tired eyes and hardened voices. A girl named Tiff who dyed her hair a new color every week to feel something. A boy named Jordan who wore 3 hoodies at once, not for fashion, but because he had no jacket and it was January. Some were kicked out for being gay, others had aged out of foster care. A few just fell through the cracks, and yet in that dingy room with mismatched chairs and a stained carpet they laughed. They passed around a guitar with only 5 strings. They argued about which horror movie was the best. They existed. It was the first place in weeks where I didn't feel like a ghost. Maggie called it a drop-in family, a place to land, not stay forever, but long enough to catch your breath. After a few visits, I started helping out, sorting canned goods, wiping down tables, picking up donations from local shops. It gave me something I hadn't had since my father kicked me out, purpose. One afternoon, while folding clothes in the back, Maggie came in holding a blue binder. "This yours?" she asked. My heart skipped. I recognized it immediately, a journal. I must have left it in my car when I came in for chili and never noticed. I grabbed it, clutching it like a life raft. "Don't worry," she said gently. Didn't read it. I nodded, but I wasn't embarrassed anymore. Not of what I wrote. Not of who I was. If anything, I was starting to understand that those words weren't shameful. They were mine, a record of my pain, my survival. Over the next few weeks, that center became my anchor. Tiff taught me how to bleach my own jeans. Jordan introduced me to his favorite band and told me stories about sleeping in bus stations. Kenny stopped by now and then with leftovers from the diner. We'd sit out back and share fries like old friends. One night we built a fire in a rusted barrel behind the building. Someone passed around marshmallows. We roasted them on broken coat hangers, laughing as they caught fire and fell into the ashes. It was chaotic and messy and nothing like the holidays I used to know, but for the first time I didn't feel like an outsider looking in. I belonged. Even though we were all carrying invisible wounds, no one judged the scars. We didn't have to explain ourselves, we just showed up. And in a world that had told me I didn't matter, that kind of acceptance was more powerful than any apology my parents could ever give. Still at night, alone in my car or curled up on a cot in the shelter's side room, I thought of home. I wondered if Ellie missed me, if Mom regretted staying silent, if Dad ever opened the door to my room and paused just for a second like something was missing. It hurt to think about them, but the pain didn't control me anymore. It just lived beside me, like a shadow that followed but no longer led. One evening, Maggie asked me what I wanted to do next. Not forever, she said. Just the next step. The question caught me off guard. I hadn't thought about the future in weeks. My world had shrunk to meals, warmth, safety. But as I looked around at the mismatched community that had embraced me, something sparked. I want to finish school, I said. I want to prove them wrong. She smiled, her eyes kind. That's a good place to start. And it was. I enrolled in a GED program that met 3 nights a week in a church basement. It wasn't glamorous, the lights flickered, the coffee was always burnt, and the heater barely worked, but it was mine. A step toward something bigger, toward rebuilding, toward me. There are some words too heavy to say out loud. So you write them down, not to send, not to share, but to survive. I started writing letters a few weeks after I found the shelter. At first, it was just a way to let the anger out. Maggie called it emotional journaling, said it was healthy to get things off your chest. But what started as scribbled thoughts on scraps of paper turned into full-length letters addressed to people who no longer spoke my name. Dear Mom, I wrote one night, hunched over a donated notebook with a dull pencil. I wonder if you ever walk past my room and forget I'm not in there. I wonder if you think of me when you fold laundry. If you remember the way I used to sing to myself while doing homework, do you feel proud of what you did? Are you sleeping better knowing I'm gone? I wrote to Dad too. Those letters were harder, rougher, angrier. Dear Dad, you taught me to throw a baseball, to mow a lawn in straight lines, to fix a flat tire. You also taught me that love has limits, that being your son meant meeting conditions I never agreed to. Did it ever occur to you that I'm still your child, even if I love differently? But the hardest letters, the ones that made my hands shake, were the ones to Ellie. She was just 14 when I left, still growing into herself. Still young enough to believe that family was forever. Dear Ellie, I saw your science fair picture online. You look so grown up. I hope you're okay. I hope you still draw. Remember that dumb song we made up about grilled cheese? I still sing it sometimes, even now. I miss you. I kept those letters in a shoebox beneath my cot. I never planned on sending them. That wasn't the point. Writing was the only way I could speak when the world had silenced me. Some nights I'd pull them out, reread them, cry a little, and tuck them back away like fragile pieces of something lost. One letter, though, one almost got sent. It was a cold night, February. The kind of cold that wraps around your bones and squeezes. The shelter's heater had gone out again. I was bundled in 3 layers, sipping instant coffee Maggie made on a portable stove. Kenny had dropped off extra blankets, but sleep was impossible, so I wrote. It was a birthday letter for my mother, not to forgive her, not even to confront her, just to remind her that I remembered. That despite everything, I still knew the date, still knew her favorite flowers, still remembered the perfume she used to wear when she picked me up from school. I even bought a stamp. I stared at the envelope for a long time, fingers trembling, the streetlight outside flickering through the window like some divine signal waiting to be read. I almost mailed it, but I didn't. I burned it in the metal fire barrel out back. Because that's what healing looked like sometimes, choosing not to reach for people who let you fall. And yet the letters kept coming. Every time something big happened, when I passed my GED practice test, when I made a new friend, when I finally smiled without guilt, I wrote about it. Documented my life as if they were still watching, as if they deserved to know the person I was becoming. But these weren't love letters anymore. They weren't pleas for reconciliation. They were records, testimonies of survival. Proof that I didn't vanish when they turned their backs. I also began to write to Luke. Those letters were complicated. Dear Luke, I hate that I still think about you, that I wonder if you miss me. I know you made your choices. I know you chose safety over truth, but I wish you'd fought just once for us. Sometimes I dream about that day in your room when we played that Killer's CD on repeat. It was scratchy, remember, we didn't care. That was the last time I felt whole. I wrote dozens of letters to him, some angry, some nostalgic, some filled with a kind of desperate hope I hated myself for, but again, none of them were sent. Because I knew something now, something it had taken sleeping in parking lots and peeling my soul open to strangers to realize. I didn't need their permission to exist. I wasn't waiting for their redemption. I was building my own. One night, as I tucked away another letter to Ellie, Maggie sat down beside me. She never pried, but she always noticed. "You write like someone's listening," she said softly. I smiled. "Maybe someone will someday." She nodded, "Maybe. But even if they don't, write anyway." And I did. Those letters became my therapy, my confession booth, my punching bag. They were where I poured my doubt, my rage, my growth. They were where I became real to myself again. I was still Aaron Miller, not son of Daniel, not problem child, not deviant, just Aaron, gay, homeless, healing, surviving. And somewhere deep in those scribbled pages I felt it shift, no longer just surviving, but becoming something stronger. People think hitting rock bottom is the end of the story, but it's not. Sometimes it's the start of a climb you never imagined making, one shaky, uncertain step at a time. Getting my GED wasn't about proving anything to anyone, not at first. It was just about taking something back, something I could own. Something that wasn't tied to shame or silence or the house I got kicked out of. I remember walking into that church basement for the first time. The classroom was nothing more than a storage room cleared out just enough for a few folding tables and plastic chairs. The walls were bare except for a crooked whiteboard and a faded poster that said "Believe in yourself." It was corny, and I hated how much I needed it. There were 6 of us in the program. I was the youngest by a few years. Most of the others were people whose lives had taken turns like mine, twists and wrecks and rebuilds. One woman named Carla had 3 kids and a tattoo of a phoenix on her wrist. She told me she dropped out at 15 after her mom overdosed. A guy named Ray had been in and out of jail since he was 16. No one wore their pain like a badge, but it was there, in the way we talked, in the way we avoided eye contact, in the way we showed up anyway. Our instructor was a wiry old man named Mr. Langley, retired teacher, Vietnam vet, wore the same tan cardigan every class and always smelled faintly of peppermint and sawdust. He didn't say much about himself, but he saw everything. "Knowledge doesn't care where you come from," he said on the first day, tapping the whiteboard. "It just wants to be held." He gave me a copy of Mice and Men and a packet of algebra problems. "Let's see what sticks." I failed the first test, not because I was dumb, but because my brain was fried. Weeks of sleeping in a shelter, dealing with the echoes of rejection, and trying to piece together my self-worth had left me in survival mode. Who cared about solving for X when you didn't know where your next meal was coming from? But I kept going. I showed up, I studied, I stayed after class. Mr. Langley would scribble extra notes in the margins of my worksheets. Maggie made flashcards with me during shelter dinners. Tiff would quiz me between episodes of whatever trash TV show she was currently obsessed with. Bit by bit, things started to stick. One night after class, I stayed behind to help clean up. Mr. Langley leaned on his cane and watched me stack chairs. "You're good at this," he said. "At stacking chairs?" I asked with a grin. He chuckled. "At pushing through. Most people don't come back after that first F you did." I shrugged. "I've failed bigger things than a math test." "Still counts," he said, "and so will passing." That night I walked back to the shelter with a strange warmth in my chest. Not quite pride, not yet, but something close. Passing the GED test didn't happen overnight. It took 3 months of grinding, of second-guessing, of staying up late reading passages aloud to myself under a flashlight because the shelter's power was spotty. And then one Friday I took the test. 5 hours in a beige room with flickering lights and a proctor who smelled like mothballs. I walked out dazed, convinced I'd blown it. But a week later, Maggie burst into the room holding an envelope. I opened it with shaking hands. I passed. I cried, harder than I had since the night I got kicked out, not because I passed a test, but because for the first time in what felt like forever, I'd won something. And it wasn't just mine. It was for every version of me that had slept in the car, that had been called a disgrace, that had written letters no one would read. That night the shelter threw me a little party. Dollar store balloons, burnt cupcakes. Jordan made a playlist that was mostly tolerable. Tiff hugged me so hard I thought she might crack a rib. Kenny brought a milkshake and said, "You clean up all right, scholar." I wasn't used to celebration. I didn't know how to hold it without flinching, but I let myself smile. Let myself believe, for once, that maybe I wasn't doomed to be a statistic. And as if on cue, the next day, a letter came from my mother. The return address was my old house. The handwriting was unmistakable. I didn't open it right away. I carried it around in my coat pocket for days, rubbing the corner between my fingers like a worry stone. When I finally opened it, my hands were steady. It wasn't long. "Aaron, I hope this reaches you. Ellie told me she found something online about you getting your GED. I'm proud. I know you probably don't want to hear that from me. I don't know how to say everything I should have said then, but I'm trying. I'm sorry." Mom. No signature, no return phone number, just "I'm sorry." I folded the letter and put it back in the envelope. It didn't fix anything. It didn't erase what she let happen, but it cracked something open. I didn't write back, not yet. But for the first time, I started to think about what I might say, if I ever did, because maybe I was finally building a life that wasn't about them anymore, a life with a foundation of my own making. It had been almost a year since I last saw him. Luke, the boy who once held my hand under a scratchy blanket in his basement while pretending we weren't afraid of who we were, the boy who ghosted me when things got real. The boy who in so many ways had been my beginning and my first ending. And then he showed up. It was an ordinary Tuesday. I'd just gotten off from my shift at the thrift store down on Maple, a part-time gig mister. Langley helped me land after passing my GED. I was tired, sore, and still wearing a name tag that read Aaron M. in smudged Sharpie. I was locking up the back door when I heard it. Aaron. At first, I thought I was imagining it, that my brain was playing tricks on me, but I turned around and there he was. Luke, he looked older, sharper jawline, shorter hair, but the same hazel eyes, the same nervous twitch at the corner of his mouth. My stomach flipped. I felt like I'd just been kicked in the ribs by a ghost. "What are you doing here?" I asked. He smiled awkwardly. I saw you online. Maggie posted that thing about your GED. I didn't even know you were still in town." What? I narrowed my eyes. "You saw it and decided what?" That now was the time to make a surprise cameo. "I didn't know how to reach you," he said. "I wasn't sure you'd even talk to me." I crossed my arms. "You're lucky I didn't slam the door in your face." He stepped back, nodding slowly. "Yeah, I probably deserve that." There was a long pause, the kind that makes your skin itch. "You look good," he said finally. "You don't get to say that," I shot back. "You don't get to show up after all this time and pretend like it's been a pause." He looked like he'd been slapped. "I'm not pretending. I know what I did. I was a coward." I didn't answer. Because yes, he was, but hearing him say it out loud didn't make it hurt less. He rubbed the back of his neck. "I'm married now. Her name's Emily." I stared at him. "So why are you here, Luke?" He looked down, took a breath. "Because I've thought about you every day since I let you walk away, and I know I don't have the right to ask anything, but I needed to say it to tell you I'm sorry, that I was scared, that I loved you, but I didn't know how to survive it." What? The words hit me like a wave, not because I believed him, but because they still mattered. I hated that they still mattered. I turned and unlocked the door again. "Come inside, we're not having this conversation in an alley." What? He followed me into the small break room, the overhead light buzzing like a mosquito. I sat on a plastic chair. He stood. "So," I said, arms folded, "what do you want from me?" He shook his head. "Nothing, I swear. I wanted to know how you were, if you hated me." "I did," I said bluntly. "For a long time. You didn't just disappear, Luke, you evaporated. And when my life exploded, you weren't there." "I know," he whispered. "And I've hated myself for it." Silence again, heavy, strained, too full of things that would never be said. He finally sat across from me. "Emily doesn't know," he said quietly, "about me, about us." My eyes narrowed. "Why are you telling me this?" "Because I'm tired of pretending," he said, "tired of hiding." "Then stop hiding," I snapped, "but don't drag me back into your closet." He looked away, ashamed. I leaned forward. "Look, I loved you. And maybe part of me still does, but I learned to live without you. I built something real from the wreckage you left. You don't get to come in now and rewrite the ending." "I'm not asking to," he said. "I'm just trying to make peace." What? I stood up. "Then make it with yourself, because I'm done bleeding for people who only show up when it's convenient." He stood too. "I understand." I walked him to the door. Just before he stepped out, he turned back. "I meant it, you know," he said, "back then when I kissed you, when I said I dreamed about you." I nodded. "I know, but dreams fade, Luke, and I'm awake now." He left. I stood there in the doorway, staring at the place he had been. And for the first time, I didn't cry. I just felt free. That night, I wrote one last letter. "Dear Luke, you were my first kiss, my first heartbreak, my first silence. You were also my first lesson that love is not love if it only exists in the shadows. I don't hate you. I don't even wish you harm. I just hope that one day you'll stop running from yourself, because I did, and it saved me. Goodbye, Aaron." I folded the letter, lit a match, and let it burn in the fire barrel behind the thrift store. Sometimes letting go isn't dramatic. Sometimes it's just a slow exhale in the quiet. It had been nearly 3 years since I last heard her voice, but I knew it instantly. Like a song I hadn't played in forever but still remembered every word to. Aaron. I froze. I was in the stockroom at the thrift store taping up a busted donation box when my phone buzzed. Unknown number. I never answered those, but something told me to pick up. "Hello," I said cautiously. Silence for a second, then, "It's Ellie." What? My legs nearly gave out. "Ellie," I whispered. "Wait, how?" I found you through Maggie's Facebook, she said quickly. You were in a post about the community garden project. You were holding a shovel and looking annoyed. What? I laughed before I could stop myself. Sounds about right. There was a pause on her end, then her voice cracked. Aaron, I miss you. That was all it took. My knees hit the floor. I didn't even realize I was crying until I heard myself sob into the phone. I miss you too, I said, trying to breathe. We talked for 2 hours, about everything and nothing. About how she kept that stupid grilled cheese song alive, about how she still drew comics and even won an art contest at school. She told me she always knew where I was, sort of. That she'd stalked every public post, read every scrap she could find online, and memorized every blurry photo. And then she said it, Dad's sick. The room went still. Sick how? I asked, voice flat. He's got kidney failure. Stage 5, he's been on dialysis for 6 months now. I didn't say anything, couldn't. He's on a transplant list, she continued, her voice quieter now. But it's slow, he's not a priority case. The doctors said it could take years, he's getting worse. I closed my eyes, my chest burned. And Mom, I asked. She's holding it together, I guess, but you know her, she doesn't really say much anymore. Just walks around like everything's fine, even when it's falling apart. I pressed the heel of my hand into my eye. Why are you telling me this? I finally asked, because, she hesitated, you're a match. Blood type, tissue compatibility, they tested us, you're his best shot. I let that sit, she sniffled on the other end. I know you don't owe him anything, and I'm not asking for him, I'm asking for me. Because if he dies and I didn't try everything, I'll never forgive myself. The silence was thick, not angry, just full of things too big for words. I'm not saying yes, I said finally. I understand. What? But I'm not saying no either. She let out a breath. Can I come see you? I hesitated, then said, yeah, tomorrow. Tomorrow, she echoed. When I hung up, I just sat there, surrounded by boxes of someone else's forgotten junk, feeling like my heart had been ripped open and stitched back up in the same breath. That night I couldn't sleep. I stared at the ceiling, thinking about the man who once taught me how to skip stones and drove me to Little Leg. The man who kicked me out and never once looked back. The man who now needed me to survive, and I thought about what that meant, not just biologically, but emotionally. What did it mean to give someone a piece of you, literally, when they never wanted the rest? The next day, Ellie arrived with a shy smile, and the same spark in her eyes I remembered from every silly sibling adventure we used to have. We hugged for 5 minutes straight. It felt like waking up from a dream I didn't know I'd been trapped in. Over burgers at a cheap diner, we talked more. She told me about Dad's condition in detail. About the hospital visits, the needles, the fear in his eyes he never used to show. He talks about you, she said. Not often, but he does. He watches the front door sometimes, like he expects you to walk through it. What? He had his chance, I said bitterly. I know, she nodded, but I think he regrets it. I looked at her, and regret's supposed to fix everything. No, she said, it's not supposed to fix you, but maybe it broke him. What? That hit harder than I wanted it to. Before she left, she handed me a manila envelope. Inside was a medical file, lab results, blood compatibility charts, transplant info, a list of donor risks and benefits she didn't push. She just said, I wanted you to have the facts. Whatever you decide, I'll respect it. She hugged me one last time, tighter than before. I love you, Aaron. I love you too, I whispered, and then she was gone. I held the file long after she left. It felt heavy, not just in weight, but in meaning. I wasn't the lost kid in the back of a Corolla anymore. I wasn't powerless. I held the key to his survival. And for the first time since he slammed the door in my face, I realized something. He needed me now. But the question that haunted me wasn't, can I help him? It was, should I? I agreed to meet them, not because I'd decided to donate my kidney, not because I was ready to forgive, but because I needed to see their faces. I needed to look my past in the eye and decide, once and for all, if the boy who walked away from their doorstep was still inside me, or if he'd grown into someone new. We met at a neutral place, Ellie's idea. A private room at a local community center Maggie helped me reserve. No restaurants, no hospital waiting rooms, no staged comfort. Just 4 chairs, a pitcher of water, and enough silence to drown in. I got there first. I wore my cleanest clothes, not because I wanted to impress them, but because I wanted to show them what they missed. That I wasn't some broken castaway anymore. I was whole, scarred maybe, but whole. They arrived 10 minutes late. My mother walked in first. She looked older, thinner, paler, eyes weighed down by years. She wore a cardigan I remembered from my childhood. It used to smell like vanilla and dryer sheets. Now it just looked small on her. My father followed. He was hunched slightly, his face pale, thinner than I remembered. The once booming man who threw me out of his house looked like a ghost wearing his skin. Ellie brought up the rear, holding a folder like it was a shield. No one said anything for a long time. Then Mom whispered, "Hi, sweetheart." What? I didn't answer. We sat. Dad cleared his throat. "Thanks for meeting us." Still nothing from me. Ellie took the lead. She opened the folder and began going over the logistics, the same stuff she'd already told me. Blood type match, medical process, recovery time. I didn't really hear it. My eyes were locked on my parents. My mother couldn't meet my gaze. Her hands were folded tightly on the table, knuckles white. My father, to his credit, looked me dead in the eye, and for the first time in years he looked afraid. "Why now?" I asked suddenly. They both jumped a little. "Why now? Why do I matter now that you're dying?" My mother flinched. "Aaron." "No," I said, "say it. You had years. Years to pick up the phone, to send a letter, to show up. And now that your body's failing, I magically matter again." My father spoke. His voice was rough, strained. "I was wrong." "What?" "That caught me off guard. I was wrong," he repeated. "I was scared and proud and stupid. I thought I was protecting the family. I didn't understand. I didn't try to understand." "You didn't need to," I snapped. "All you had to do was not kick your son out into the street." He looked down. My mom finally spoke. "We thought we were doing the right thing, the church, the community." "The community," I laughed bitterly. "You chose their judgment over your own child." "I know," she whispered, "and I live with that every day." The room fell silent again. After a moment, Ellie reached out, put her hand over mine. "I'm not asking you to forgive them. I don't want to lose you both." That nearly broke me, but I held it together. "Here's what's going to happen," I said, voice steady. "If I agree to do this, if I want something in return." They both looked up. "I want a public apology." My father's brows knitted. "What do you mean?" "I mean I want you to tell the truth to our extended family, to your friends, to the people you lied to about why I disappeared. I want a letter, no, a post, public on Facebook, wherever you announced my rebellion. I want you to take it back, loudly, clearly." My mother paled. "Aaron, that would ruin your image," I snapped. "Maybe if you cared about me as much as your image 3 years ago, we wouldn't be sitting here." My father was silent. Then, to my shock, he nodded. "Okay." My mother stared at him. "Daniel." He cut her off. "He's right." What? The air went still. He looked at me again. "I'll write it. You don't even have to donate. I'll write it anyway. I should have done it years ago." I wasn't expecting that. Was it manipulation, guilt, or maybe something real? I didn't know. All I knew was, for the first time, my father wasn't shouting. He wasn't judging. He wasn't demanding. He was asking, and that terrified me more than anything. When the meeting ended, I walked them out. Mom tried to hug me. I didn't move. Ellie kissed my cheek. My father paused at the door. "Aaron," he said softly, "if this is goodbye, I understand, but if it's not, thank you." Then they left. I stood alone in the hallway for a long time, shaking. Because I realized something. No matter what I decided this moment, this summit, had already changed everything. I wasn't a scared teenager begging to be loved anymore. I was a man, and for once I had the power. I told myself I was going back to the hospital for answers. I didn't owe them anything, least of all my body. But something about my father's voice at the community center, so hollow, so unsteady, lingered like smoke in my chest. I needed to see him again on his turf, to look into his eyes one last time and see if the man who once banished me had truly changed. Ellie met me at the hospital entrance. She looked hopeful, too hopeful. Like this would be the part in the movie where forgiveness swells in a stirring orchestral score and broken families become whole again. I didn't want to break her heart, but I also couldn't give her false hope. "I'm not making any promises," I told her. "You're here," she said, gripping my hand. "That's enough." The hospital room was quiet. Machines beeped gently in the background. My father lay in bed, pale and thin, his skin stretched too tight over his knuckles. He looked smaller, like someone had drained all the bluster out of him and left only the scaffolding. He looked at me when I entered. For a second, neither of us said a word. Then he smiled weakly. "You look strong." I stayed by the door. "I am." A nod. "Good. You were always tougher than I gave you credit for." I didn't reply. He motioned to the chair beside the bed. "Sit if you want." I stayed standing. "Ellie said you might come," he said. "Said you were thinking about helping." I studied his face, the tremble in his hands, the way he tried to hold my gaze. "You posted the apology?" I asked. He nodded. "Yesterday." I pulled out my phone and checked. It was there. A public Facebook post, already flooded with comments. He'd written it himself. "Years ago, I made the worst mistake of my life. I let fear and pride cost me my son. I kicked Aaron out of our home for being gay, and in doing so, I betrayed the very idea of fatherhood. I can never undo that harm, but I want to say, clearly and publicly, I was wrong. And I am sorry." I stared at it for a long time. A dozen of his church friends had already unfriended him. A handful of relatives left supportive comments. My throat tightened, but not out of sentimentality, out of confusion, suspicion. Why now? I asked again. Why post that now? He didn't flinch because it's true. But it wasn't true 3 years ago, 2 years ago, not even last week. He exhaled slowly. It's always been true. I just wasn't strong enough to admit it until I had something to lose. I stared at him hard. You mean until you were the one who needed saving? His lips parted, but no words came out, and in that moment I saw it, the flicker. The hesitation, the same look he had the night he threw me out, the same wall behind his eyes, still there. I appreciate the post, I said. It'll mean something to Ellie, maybe even to Mom. But not to you, he asked, voice cracking. I shook my head because I still don't believe you. He winced like I'd struck him. You look me in the eye, I said, stepping closer, and you tell me, if you weren't sick, if your kidneys were fine, if I wasn't a biological match, would I still be dead to you? What? He opened his mouth, closed it, looked down. Exactly. I don't need a donor, he whispered. I need a son. You had one, I said coldly, but you threw him out with a duffel bag and a warning to figure it out. What? He wiped at his eyes. I've had 3 years to think about that moment every single day. Then you should have used one of those days to apologize. He didn't speak. I sat finally, not because he asked, but because I wanted him to feel the weight of this conversation land right in front of him. I used to beg for your love, I said. I wrote letters, dreamed up imaginary conversations where you said you were sorry, but I don't need that anymore. I'm here for one reason, to tell you I see through this, the post, the tears, the timing. He blinked hard. So this is about punishment? No, I said, it's about clarity. For once, you get to sit with the unknown. You get to wonder whether someone will show up for you or leave you behind. The machine beeped steadily. A reminder that time was ticking. I'm not asking for your kidney because I deserve it, he said, voice ragged. I'm asking because I want to earn the chance to be better. I stood up. I believe people can change, I said. But I also believe some damage can't be undone. He nodded slowly, tears slipping down his cheeks. You're right, he whispered. I walked to the door, paused. One more thing, I said. He looked up. I didn't come here today for you. What? His brow furrowed. I came for me, to prove to myself that I could walk into this room, face the man who broke me, and walk out whole. And I did. As the door clicked shut behind me, I exhaled the heaviest breath of my life. His eyes still lied, but mine didn't. In the days that followed my visit to the hospital, the apology post went viral, well, viral enough, at least within the circles that mattered. My father's name, once associated with stoic Sunday church services and city council volunteer work, was now tangled in comment threads, reposts, and whispered conversations over coffee. Some praised him. Said it took courage to admit being wrong. Others weren't as forgiving. He lost a speaking engagement at a local men's group. One of his closest friends, a retired pastor, left a comment that simply said, disappointing. A few people accused him of caving to the woke mob. Others, mostly younger folks, thanked him. A couple came out to their own families because of it. It was strange watching it unfold from the sidelines. Like observing a movie I'd once been the star of, only now I was just background noise. But what stunned me most was what didn't happen. No follow-up calls from my parents, no extra messages from my mother. No thank you from my father for even considering the idea of helping him live. Just silence. I should have expected that. Ellie, though, checked in every day. She sent me updates from the hospital, snapshots of his vitals. A copy of the transplant evaluation form fully filled out except for the donor signature. I'm not pressuring you, she said in one message, but they need to know soon. The window's closing. What? That night I walked alone to the fire barrel behind the shelter. I didn't bring a letter this time. Just stood there, staring at the ashes of all the things I never mailed, never said. Maggie found me like that. You've got your storm face on, she said softly. I looked at her, surprised. Storm face. She nodded. That look people get when something's brewing inside. Big, heavy decisions. You're either about to cry, run, or burn the whole world down. What? I cracked a smile, maybe all three. She leaned against the railing beside me. You're thinking about donating, she asked. I nodded slowly. Because you want to help or because you want to heal? That question stuck in my ribs. Honestly, I said after a long silence, I don't know, maybe both, maybe neither. Maybe I just want to stop feeling this all the time. She didn't offer an answer. She didn't have to. Maggie wasn't in the business of advice. She was in the business of presence, and that sometimes was more powerful than any wisdom. Later that night, I pulled out my medical packet again, flipped through every form, every risk factor. I reread the bolded statement at the top of one page. Living donation is a personal decision. You should not feel pressured. Pressure wasn't the word for what I was feeling. This was something deeper. Something closer to obligation twisted around old love and fresh wounds. The next morning I met with the transplant coordinator at the hospital. I haven't made a decision yet, I told her. That's okay, she said. But we do need to move fast if you're considering it. Your father's function is declining. I sat in that office for almost an hour asking every question I could think of. Recovery time, complications, emotional toll. She answered them all with a clinical calm that made the weight of it feel even heavier. Then she asked me something I wasn't prepared for. Do you feel safe? I blinked. What do you mean? What? Do you feel emotionally safe making this choice, without fear of manipulation, guilt, or retribution? I hesitated too long. That's your answer, she said gently. You don't have to decide today or ever. But if you do this, it needs to be because you want to, not because you're scared not to. I nodded, heart pounding. That afternoon I received a text from my mother. He's asking for you. I stared at it for a long time, asking for me. Like I was a medicine, a cure, a solution to a mess he still hadn't cleaned up. Later that evening Ellie called. He's not doing well, she said softly. They think he might not make it through the weekend. I swallowed hard. I'm sorry. What? Are you going to say goodbye? It wasn't an accusation, just a question, a soft one, and I didn't have an answer. I walked for hours that night through empty neighborhoods and quiet streets. Every porch light felt like a ghost. Every car that passed made me flinch. Eventually, I ended up outside the house I grew up in. The porch light was still the same. So was the chipped paint on the railing. I didn't go inside. I just stood there remembering everything I had been here and everything I wasn't anymore. And I realized I didn't owe them my body, not my forgiveness, not even a goodbye, but I owed myself the freedom of letting go. It was a Friday morning when I made the call. The transplant coordinator picked up on the second ring, her voice as warm and steady as I remembered. I've made my decision, I said. She didn't rush me, didn't try to guess. She just waited, letting the silence hold its shape until I was ready to fill it. I'm not going to donate. There it was, out loud, final, not whispered in a letter, not scribbled in a journal, said with full conviction and clarity. I understand, she said gently. Do you want me to notify the family or? I'll do it, I replied. Whatever you need, she said. And Aaron, just so you know, you're not the first person to say no, and you won't be the last. What? I hung up, my hands were shaking, but my chest felt lighter than it had in years. Not because the choice was easy, it wasn't, but because it was mine, entirely mine, and no one could take that from me. I texted Ellie first. I'm not going to do it, I hope you can understand. I love you. She didn't respond right away. 15 minutes passed. Then a single message, I do understand, and I still love you too. That was the hardest part, hurting her. Knowing she'd be the one caught in the middle, trying to stitch a family together that had been torn apart by silence and pride and shame. But she understood, even if it hurt. My next call was to my mother. She didn't answer. So I left a voicemail. Hi Mom, it's Aaron. I just wanted to let you know I've decided not to donate. I know this probably isn't what you were hoping for, but I've spent the last 3 years rebuilding myself, and I can't risk unraveling that to save someone who never once tried to save me. What? I paused. I hope you can respect that. Goodbye. I didn't call my father. I figured if he really needed to hear it from me, he could call, but I knew he wouldn't. That would require something more than his pride could stomach. The backlash came fast. Within hours, my uncle, Dad's brother, sent me a scathing message on Facebook. Your father made a mistake, sure, but refusing to help now, that's evil, that's spite. You'll regret this for the rest of your life. What? I deleted it. An old family friend emailed me. Sometimes we have to rise above our trauma, show grace. That's what God would want. I wanted to scream. Where was that grace when I was freezing in my car? Where was God when I begged for a roof, a bed, a single word of kindness? Instead, I replied with one sentence. God gave me the strength to say no. Some people unfriended me. Others sent quiet messages of support. A few came out to me saying, I wish I had the courage to say no to the people who hurt me. But no message hit harder than the one that came late that night. From my father, it was just 5 words. I hope you sleep well. What? It wasn't a plea or a thank you or even anger. It was resentment disguised as self-righteousness. I stared at it for a long time. I didn't reply because I did sleep well that night for the first time in years. No nightmares, no guilt. No weight of expectations pressed into my chest, just peace. And that scared me more than anything, because peace, I'd learned, is not loud. It doesn't announce itself. It just arrives quietly, unapologetically, and asks if you're ready to let go. The next morning I woke up and went to the shelter early. helped Maggie unload food donations, sorted cans, played Uno with Tiff and Jordan for 2 straight hours and lost every single game. We laughed, we lived. And in the middle of that laughter, I realized something else. I had saved a life. Mine, not in the dramatic Hollywood way, not with flashing lights and slow-motion speeches, but in the quiet decision to choose me. To protect the boy who once cried himself to sleep in the back of a Corolla, to honor the man who had grown from those ashes, because saying no wasn't about revenge, it was about dignity, it was about closure. And sometimes closure doesn't look like a hug in a hospital room. Sometimes it's walking away and not turning back. The call came on a rainy Tuesday morning. I was folding laundry in the shelter's back room, clean towels, donated jackets, a pile of mismatched socks, when my phone buzzed in my pocket. Ellie's name lit up the screen. The moment I saw it, I knew. I answered on the second ring. "He's gone," she said, voice raw. I sat down hard on the nearest chair. The air left my lungs like I'd been punched. "They tried to stabilize him around 3 a.m., she continued, but his heart just gave out. "I said nothing. He asked for you," she whispered. "At the end, he kept saying your name." What? Tears burned behind my eyes, but they didn't fall. "Not yet, not then." "I'm sorry," she said. "You don't need to be," I replied, my voice steadier than I expected. "You did everything you could." There was a long pause on the line. Rain drummed softly against the windows. "I should come," I murmured, half to myself. "No," Ellie said firmly. "You made your choice, and you were right to. Don't let anyone take that from you." But they did try. The messages came in waves, some subtle, others sharp. "How could you let your own father die? You had the chance to be the bigger person. Bet you feel proud now." Some from extended family, others from strangers. People who only ever saw one piece of the story and thought it made them judges, jurors, and executioners. I didn't reply to any of them. Instead, I went for a walk, through the neighborhood where I used to trick or treat. Past the school I never graduated from, past the ballpark where my dad once cheered the loudest from the bleachers, back when life was simpler and love didn't come with conditions. I stopped in front of the old house. The porch light was off. Ellie opened the door a crack when she saw me. Her eyes were red and puffy, hair tied in a loose, exhausted bun. "You came," she said. "I didn't know if I should." She pulled me into a hug before I could finish the sentence. Inside, everything looked smaller, or maybe I had just grown. The couch was still the same hideous floral print. The mantel still held dusty trophies from my childhood: soccer, spelling bee, perfect attendance. Only now there was a new photo, Dad in his hospital gown, smiling thinly, a recent memory pretending to be peace. Mom didn't come out to greet me. I wasn't sure if she was hiding or just too hollowed out to speak. Ellie walked me into the den. "We're not doing a church service," she said. "Dad didn't want one." "Really?" She nodded, said it felt dishonest. I almost laughed. It was so unlike him to admit that. But maybe at the end he was trying, even if it was too little, too late. She handed me a small envelope. "He wrote this the day after your visit." I took it with trembling fingers. Alone in the backyard, our old backyard, I opened it. "Aaron, if you're reading this, I guess I didn't get to say goodbye in person. I don't know if I deserve one. I don't know if I deserve this letter, but I wanted you to have something. Something that wasn't anger or silence or shame. I don't expect forgiveness, but I want you to know that you were always my son, even when I failed to act like a father. I saw what you became. I heard about what you built. And I was proud, even if I didn't earn the right to be. Love." I read it 3 times, then I folded it neatly and slipped it back into the envelope, not because I forgave him, but because I needed to believe he meant it. I left soon after, didn't stay for dinner, didn't ask about the will or the funeral plans, just hugged Ellie, kissed her forehead, and walked back out into the drizzle. That night, the shelter was quiet. Maggie had left a candle burning in the window. Tiff was asleep in the lounge with a book over her face. Jordan was snoring from the couch. I sat in the kitchen and stared at the envelope for a long time. Then I set it down and picked up my journal. "Dear Dad, you were wrong, but you were also human. You hurt me in ways I may never fully recover from. But I didn't let that pain define me. I became someone you couldn't recognize because I had to, and while I didn't save your life, I did save mine, and that has to be enough. Aaron." I closed the journal and leaned back in the chair, and that's when the tears finally came. Not from grief, not from guilt, from release, because sometimes we don't get closure wrapped in bows or bathed in sunlight. Sometimes it comes with rain and silence and a single letter that arrives too late, and still we move forward. Not because we forget, but because we deserve to. I used to believe healing meant going back to the way things were, back to the people who hurt me, back to a time when I thought love was guaranteed and family was unconditional. But healing isn't about going back. It's about becoming someone who can stand in the rubble of what was and still breathe, still walk, still live. After my father's death, things didn't magically settle. There was no final conversation, no perfect moment where all the pieces fit into place. My mother never reached out again, not with words that mattered, not with anything that could be called love. I saw her briefly at the scattering of his ashes. It wasn't a funeral, he didn't want one. Just a small, awkward gathering in a park he used to walk through with Ellie when she was little. I stood at the edge of the group, not speaking, watching the gray dust vanish into the wind. She didn't look at me. I didn't expect her to. Ellie and I still talk, not every day, but enough. She sends pictures of her art, more detailed now, more expressive. She drew one of me once, gave me sharp eyes and steady hands, said it was how she saw me. I keep it pinned above my bed at the shelter, next to a list of GED goals and a clipping from the local paper about the community garden I helped rebuild. I'm not rich, I'm not famous, I still sleep in a shared room, still rotate between part-time jobs, still eat too many instant noodles, but I'm not the scared kid in the back of the Corolla anymore. I'm Aaron. No longer Aaron the embarrassment, or Aaron the burden, or Aaron the missing. Just Aaron, and that's enough. One afternoon, Maggie handed me a volunteer form. "You've got a knack for this," she said. "Ever thought about becoming a caseworker? You've walked the road. Others need a guide who's been there." I stared at the form for a long time. It asked questions like, what drives you to help others? How do you define recovery? What's one thing you would tell someone who feels invisible? I thought of all the answers I could give. All the nights I'd written letters I never sent. All the kids I'd met whose eyes looked like mine used to. And I realized I wanted to help them. Not because I was healed, but because I understood what it meant to break and keep moving anyway. To bleed and still love, to lose and still build. To walk through fire and still believe in your own worth. The night I mailed in the form, I sat outside under a sky cracked with stars and opened my journal one last time. No letter, just a statement. "My name is Aaron and I choose me." I whispered it aloud once, twice, then louder, until it echoed into the darkness, reaching parts of myself that had waited years to hear it. And in that moment I felt whole, not because anyone gave me permission, not because someone finally apologized the right way, but because I did the impossible. I lived through rejection, through homelessness, through silence, through loss. I carried my own name through fire and didn't let it burn away. And now I help others find their names too, not the ones their parents gave them, the ones they claim through pain, through healing, through resilience. Somewhere out there's another kid reading this, scared, alone, waiting for someone to choose them. If no one else does, I hope you know I do. I choose you. And more than anything, choose yourself, always. Because one day you'll stand at the edge of your old life, look it in the eye and say, "I didn't go back, I moved forward," and that is enough.